When it comes to like spiritual goals, what's your opinion on using outside forces such as drugs?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's definitely a hot topic and kind of like a buzzword nowadays, especially with the plant medicines that are becoming more and more popular in the last 10, 15 years, at least that I've seen. And no doubt they give you spiritual experiences, or what people can call spiritual experiences. I myself am not a user and or a facilitator of them because I just like to kind of do it the old-fashioned way and have my willpower and really do my work and get the experiences so that you actually earn that light, and then it becomes an essential part of your being. I think there's this really fundamental misunderstanding that spirituality and drug use can be synonymous, or they go hand in hand. And in point of fact, I don't believe that's the case at all. I think spirituality is very hard work. Proper spirituality is very hard work, and I think that there is an element of sacrificing a certain part of the ego by discipline in order to gain this light and spiritual wisdom, whereas popping a pill or doing some type of a brew or consuming some type of medicine or some type of a mushroom, it's definitely, I can see why people think it emulates spiritual experiences, but there's obviously both qualitatively and there's just a different outcome, both short-term and long-term. When you get high, after the high is definitely kind of who you are. Prior to that, maybe plus some type of an experience, which can be used for therapeutic benefits, no doubt. And there are a lot of trial tests of like MDMA and people doing psilocybin or some type of other mushroom derivatives where they're receiving therapeutic benefits to it. But I think in the context of spiritual growth, I think there is a dichotomy there that should be recognized, but it's oftentimes not talked about, where it really can't substitute for proper spiritual work, and it shouldn't be confused to be synonymous or one and the same, because they are definitely not. So it's okay, there is definitely, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, there is therapeutic benefits to a lot of these plant medicines as science is showing, but I think to confuse it as being spiritual, I think that's a misnomer that seems to be very prevalent and accepted in society nowadays, where people think spirituality and plant medicine or drug use is one and the same. And I'm of the opinion that they are not. They're quite diametrically polar opposites.
I do agree. When I stayed in the mountains with many of these the monks in the Himalayan mountains, I spent a lot of time with them, staying in the cave, staying in the ashrams, or what we call it, monasteries there. I never seen them, the higher order monks doing any drugs, not even marijuana. But when you come down, to the cities where you meet a lot of these monks, regular monks, they do marijuana, kind of some little drugs like that. Again, when you come to the West, you see a lot of people talk about the mushrooms and like the way Joe mentioned, marijuana and other substances, even ayahuasca, but I feel they may be therapeutic benefits, taking them. Okay, but if you're really interested in the spiritual growth, like I've seen many people, in the spiritual progress, one of the main thing, like Kundalini awakening. So when you awaken your Kundalini, a lot of things start happening. Again, it's not an end of a journey; it's kind of a milestone in your spiritual journey. I've seen many people, even in my group, we have a big community there. It's happening for the people so naturally. Even when I went through all these experiences like Kundalini awakening or astral travel, when I experienced myself, no drugs. I never heard about them actually. I never even tried and never know what they are like. You don't need them. In my, even in all the scriptures, the masters talks about actually, they say the human body is such a special thing in the entire universe. It can generate everything you want, even the entire pharmaceutical industry actually is inside. If you really just know how to use your breath, how to use your body, that's where all these ancient techniques come from. Just by using them, you can generate everything you need, and then it will facilitate the highest of the growth you can experience in the spiritual progress. Because I feel anything which comes from externally, like drug, you take some drug to have some experience, again you become a dependent. It makes you dependent. You're never going to be free. Literally, you're not going to be free. So true spirituality is all about making you free from the attachment. because you don't need anything. Even to that extent, I've experienced myself like you can go without even normal food for weeks together, or days together. Like you forget about drugs, you don't need even food. Like the breath is just good, breathing is good enough, the sunlight is good enough. Like the human body is that incredible actually. Like, so when you really feel that energy, when you really align your chakras, you feel phenomenal. So, but many times, people, just in the name of business, actually, when the spirituality becomes business, I think that's where these drugs come into picture. Like, I feel if anybody tells you, by taking this drug, your kundalini get awakened, I don't think it's really possible. I've never seen actually in my experience. Okay, it's only like misguiding people. So in that way, I feel you don't need any drugs. If you're really interested in spiritual, let it take its own time, because that's the best way to happen. Like when you're ready, when your nadis opens up, when your chakra aligned, and you're cleansed with a lot of things, and when you're ready to receive that so much amount of energy, because Kundalini awakening is like a huge awakening, a huge opening for the body actually. Your body needs to be ready to receive that energy, So, and you need to be ready, even the situations around you need to be okay to handle that kind of an energy. So universe has got its own way of doing things in the best way for us actually. So if you just stick on to the system and continuously, sincerely practice them, that's more than enough. In my experience, or even in my interaction with many masters, it doesn't happen just because you're really working hard on it, or you're using the best of the technique available on earth. Not because of that. It only happens. Awakening only happens when you really surrender. What we call, we have this the spiritual guide and the masters. Whenever they are really happy with you, that grace comes to you. So because of the grace, awakening happens actually. Because I've seen people working very hard in the monasteries for decades and nothing happened. Whereas somebody, just doing sincere practice for 2 years, boom, that this awakening is happening. So it's not about having a rigidity in the mind and then developing your ego and then say, oh, I'm good, I'm doing the best, so it will happen for me. No. When you really surrender, when you really listen to your intuition and do the right things, and then the grace, it can always happen to you. So in that way, the substances, drugs are definitely not an answer for these things. It will, if you want to grow spiritually, substance is not an answer. But therapeutic benefit, yes, you can try that.
Is enlightenment possible in this life?
Yeah, enlightenment. Yeah, that's a good question actually. But in my understanding, enlightenment is not one thing. Suddenly, boom, it happens for you. What they call it? In Buddhist, they call it satora. S-A-T-O-R-I, satora. They say something called instant enlightenment. There are series of them. When series of these things happens, and all put together, then you start growing one step closer to the real truth. Like you see normally what we call the sahasrara, here, there are 1,000 petals. So each petal is a satora. You make a breakthrough, when you really embrace life and when you're really sincere in your practice, in your meditations, in your breath work, what happens? You have many breakthroughs keep happening for you. Health breakthrough, financial breakthrough, relationship breakthrough. Each one is an enlightenment experience actually. It's not about, after many years, one day, suddenly the whole world changed for you. No, it starts happening, one step at a time. And it takes you closer and closer to the greater truth. And then you see the whole thing around you, your understanding changes, and your vibration changes, and then you really know that you are on the right path, and you're going towards the higher and higher breakthroughs. So that's what I define enlightenment actually. So it can happen anytime, and also keep happening. Series of these things. Okay, and much bigger and bigger thing as you go more and more with it.
I don't think enlightenment is this one thing where we are here today kind of doing our own lives and doing whatever we want, and then tomorrow is just dramatically different. Because nature doesn't work like that, right? Nature kind of works in progressive phases where it's always moving and evolving towards something. And so I think, in that context, we have the spiritual journey very similar to that, that when you do pursue it and your intention is in that direction, then you kind of always instantaneously and continuously grow and evolve as a person. And I think that there's these demarcated points that when you pursue your path, you look back and you're like, oh yeah, I am a little bit more qualitatively better today than I was yesterday, or was a week ago, or was a year ago. And I think as that path gets a little bit more and more refined, then what you find yourself happening is your desires and your ego don't haunt you as much, and they don't control you as much. And the outside world doesn't become such a burden anymore, because you've satisfied or reconciled a lot of these desires, or things that would otherwise impede consciousness as such flowing through you. So when these desires are exhausted through continuously through progressive phases in the spiritual path, I kind of find that that you as an individual allow nature to go through you at ease, and there's not so much of a resistance, and there's not so much tension. And this is something that seems a little bit abstract, especially for somebody starting on the path, because it doesn't really mean something. It doesn't mean much to somebody who hasn't experienced it. But like Mahesh was saying, when you surrender and you allow nature to go through you, you really start getting things that we would call divine grace. And I think it's really an amplification and a culmination of the absolute divine grace, which is considered enlightenment. So is it possible? I think so. I would say it is, but I don't think it's what people think it is, and I don't think it's a simple task, because I think it has to happen in successive series as you kind of refine your own consciousness and your own ego to really eradicate these desires so that nature can flow through you. I think it's a slightly more abstract concept or process than really, instant enlightenment. Like you just see a flash of light one day when you're working on a car, and there it is. I don't think it's as black and white as that. But yeah, I do think it's possible. With divine grace, anything is possible. Absolutely.
Yeah. Many of these, Joe, you rightly put it, even now, like a lot of books are available on these experiences, like Kundalini, astral travel, and like that, But when you actually go through these experiences, they're far different than what they really mentioned in the book, actually. Maybe little similarity. Okay, in that way, many times, there are people there who experienced it and then wrote a book. Okay, but the majority of them, I really doubt it. I don't know, because that's what I felt actually. Because even I happened to interact with some of these authors, in some of the conferences, But the thing is, don't go with suppose you read about some experience and you want to have it. No, just try as an experience as it is. See what comes up for you. That's amazing. Then you know what it is. It's far different than what we actually know. There's something totally different. The truth is always stranger than the fiction. That's what it is.